Yes, all right. All right. Well, like Bruno said, I'm the director at UW Superior. Stingers up. Love you guys. All right, well, I want to start tonight, first by backing up because you're too close, but secondly, by telling you about a story from a time when I was about 14 years old. And when I was 14 years old, there was this kid who was a year older than me, and he lived down the street, and we would ride the bus together every single day. And this guy, I would call an acquaintance, not a friend, because I would say he was not the nicest person. He maybe was like kind of tough, kind of guarded, kind of like bad boy cool, but I was not into that at all. I was like, I can see you for who you are. I'm not super into this. And honestly, he was kind of just a mean kid. And I can remember this one moment where we were on the bus together, and I did something very small that made him very upset. And again, he's just kind of an angry person, and this was just kind of how he reacted to things. So I'm pretty sure that I rolled down the bus window. That was like my bus window, you know, with the little latches. I rolled that down, and he got immediately upset with me. And he started saying things to me that were not very nice. And then I remember he told me this phrase. This kid liked to swear a lot. And he said, "Kalyn, go to hell." And I looked at him, and my response in that moment was, inside I was like, why is he yelling at me? Like, I've rolled down my bus window. What is happening? I don't know how to respond to this. And then little youth group Kalyn turned around, and I said, "Nick, I can't do that." And he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah. Well, I know Jesus, and I'm going to go to heaven, so I can't go to hell." And this kid was just like, "I don't know what to do with you." And he just sat down and left me alone. And that was just this weird Kalyn moment of me being myself, which is a little weird Christian 14-year-old. But it was also this kind of humorous picture of me dealing with somebody who was treating me in a way that wasn't kind. It wasn't nice what he was doing to me. Some of the words that he used towards me were not nice. And so I want to talk about the idea of what do we do when people act this way towards us? What do we do when people mistreat us? And what should our response be? What should our response be when somebody hurts us? So, you may not deal with 15-year-old Nick like I did on my bus, but I would gander that all of us have been mistreated at some point in time. We all have a friend or a family member who has done something that has really cut deep, that has really hurt us. Or maybe a little bit lighter, we've all been in a group project where we feel like we're being taken advantage of and we're kind of being left to do most of the work. We're being mistreated. Or maybe a little bit closer to home for some of you, if you've ever gone through a breakup or just losing a really close friend, I think we can very quickly and easily start to turn towards mistreating one another. And so what do we do? And I would say that this has been especially true. We're seeing this in our nation today. We're seeing what's happening in Minneapolis, that people are not being treated well. And this, what's happening in Minneapolis, I just want to say is sad. And it's not okay. And even for me, it's made me frustrated, and it's made me full of sorrow. And so what do we do? What do we do when we are faced with being wronged? When we're faced with being hurt? When we're treated like we don't matter? Well, surprise, surprise, tonight, Jesus is going to speak to that. So we're going to look at what Jesus has to say about what to do when we are mistreated. So if you'd like to, you can turn to Matthew 5. That's where we're going to be tonight. Matthew 5, starting in verse 38. And while you're going there, I'm going to remind you that here in Chi Alpha, we have been studying the Sermon on the Mount. We have been doing this all last semester, and we are going to continue to study Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And a couple of weeks ago, before the cold snap, Jenny talked to us about the kingdom of God can really be broken down into two things, which is to love God and to love others. And the section that we're going to talk about tonight is how do we love others even when we're wronged? How would Jesus call us to interact with others? And a lot of what we're going to be studying this semester is going to hit on that, is how do we interact with others? So that's what we're going to look at today. What we're going to read is going to be one of the 6 "you have heard it said" statements that Jesus, we've been working through some of these. We did some of them before the semester break, and now we're going to look at another one tonight. But this is where Jesus says, "You have heard it said," in reference to some sort of common law or practice for his original audience. And then he is also going to expound upon that and say, this is the kind of kingdom that I am bringing about. This is how I have come to fulfill that law. So we are going to look at one of those "you have heard it said" statements today. All right, so starting Matthew 5, verse 38, it says, Jesus says, "You have heard it said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles." All right, we're going to pray. Yeah, Jesus, I thank you for your wisdom, and I pray that you would help me to communicate what you are saying here well. And I pray that you would help us to live in this kind of way. Thank you, Lord Jesus. We love you, and we praise you. Amen and amen. All right, so I want to start with where Jesus starts, with the "you have heard it said, an eye for an eye." So this phrase comes directly from the Old Testament. And when we hear this phrase, we can think, an eye for an eye. That's like, if I hurt your eye, you get to poke out my eye. And I imagine our world then looks like a bunch of people with only one eye. Like we're all wandering around with poked out eyeballs. And this can seem like, oh, this is just a bunch of hurt people. And this can sound harsh to us, where we think like, why do I harm somebody back if they harm me? But really, what this law is about, it is about stopping things from escalating. It's about stopping harm from going further than what had been done. Because humanity has a bent towards not only getting even, but making someone pay more than we have been hurt. And so the point of this was to stop someone from going further than what had been done to them. To saying there's a cap on what retaliation could be taken, and all that was, it had to be equal. And again, we can think an eye for an eye means that we're poking out actual eyes. But what this often looked like was that it was just an amount that was equal to someone losing an eye or losing a tooth, or there are other body parts that are talked about in the Old Testament. But it's a lot more, think about like our judicial system, where it's like something has been done to someone, there's a value placed on how much someone should have to pay to make that right. That's pretty much the system that was happening when it's talking about an eye for an eye. It wasn't literally eyes for eyes. It was like the same value of an eyeball, somebody has to pay for that. But it's also saying there's a cap on that. You cannot make someone pay more than what an eyeball is worth. So, this is a good thing. This is a good law. But then Jesus builds upon it and says what we should do when it comes to being wronged. Not just say, hey, you can equal it, but Jesus has more to say about what we should do when we are wronged. He continues by saying, I say, Do not resist an evil person. Now, it can seem like this verse is saying, do not resist an evil person at all. Like, don't do anything. But that's not what Jesus is saying here. And we're going to look at the next 3 examples of how to resist or to respond when we are wronged. And Jesus' way of doing this is going to be a little bit weird. So turn to your neighbor and say, you're a little bit weird. Yeah, we all know it's true. All right, so let's look at the first example that Jesus gives us, where he's going to ask us to respond differently. So this is where Jesus says to turn the other cheek. He says, if someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. So the Bible Project and many other commentaries say that it's important that Jesus is saying specifically the right cheek. So if someone slaps you on the right cheek, this is significant. And so what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you pretend to do this with the person next to you. So most people are right-handed. Okay, so I need you to use your right hands. You're not actually going to hit your neighbors, please. We're going to be nice. But okay, so turn to the person next to you. If you're going to use your right hand and slap their right cheek, what kind of slap is it? Yeah, Chandler doesn't even need to turn to his friends. He just got it. All right, you can figure it out? It is a backhand slap. So if you are right-handed and you slap someone with your right hand on their right cheek, it is a backhand slap. And the importance and the significance of that is that in Jesus' day, a backhand slap was like the biggest diss you could do to somebody. Like, it was cool. I know, to us it's like, yeah, whatever, it's a slap. But to somebody, to do this to somebody was to say, I see you as less than me. I am taking away your dignity, your value. It was socially and emotionally harming someone to the greatest degree. So that's what a backhand slap meant. Now, Jesus, when he talks about slapping, I want us to understand that he is not talking about physical harm. Because when you are trying to actually physically harm someone, you don't slap them, right? You use your fists, you use your feet, right, Sam? Yes. Yes, so Jesus isn't talking about go back to physical harm, continue to put yourself in a place of going back to physical harm. But what he is saying when he says to turn the other cheek is saying to offer not your right cheek, but your left cheek, which is a way of saying, I'm inviting you to open hand slap me, which in their culture is a very different thing. In doing that, you'd be saying, I'm inviting you to treat me as an equal. You were trying to treat me as someone who is not equal, who are you trying to take away dignity. I'm inviting you to treat me as an equal. For Jesus' audience, this suggestion would have been really weird. The people who are hearing this would have thought, that's an insane idea. That is a weird way to respond. Because this reshapes the relationship. It reshapes what the person was trying to do, which is treating someone as less than, and it pushes the adversary to either back down or treat them as an equal. It's also saying, even when you devalue me, I will not do the same to you. You are still a person of value, and I will choose to treat you as such. I would say for Jesus' audience, and also for ours, we can do this when somebody treats us like we do not have value. We can do this because we know that our value comes from God and cannot be taken away by the actions or the attitudes of other people. When we know that we are valued because we are made in the image of God, we can also recognize that same value in another person. And therefore, even when someone does something to hurt us, we can see them as someone who is valued by God, and we can respond to them as such. It's saying, I'm not going to hurt you in the same way that you've hurt me by treating you like you don't matter. To turn the other cheek is to say, I'm not going to get back to you. I'm not going to get back at you in the same way. This would be weird. Now, we may not actually slap one another in our culture, for the most part. But I did want to come up with an example of maybe what this could look like. And this isn't the same thing, but it's just to like, hey, get our ideas flowing. What does this look like for us? I would say that maybe a time that you would feel like somebody isn't treating you as an equal or isn't treating you well would be like if you find out that somebody is talking bad about you behind your back, that they're saying things to other people, what is our normal response? I don't know about you, but my normal response is usually to try to tell those people that somebody else has been talking about me, to tell them, like, no, this is what's actually happening, or tell them my side of the story, try to set it straight, to try to tell them how that person isn't kind or hasn't been nice to me. And that would be normal. That's the normal way to respond when we feel like we are being mistreated. So what does it look like to treat someone as an equal, even if they hurt you? I would say this is giving someone respect, even when they don't respect you. And in the scenario of if somebody's talking about you, I think giving them respect or choosing to treat them as an equal is to go talk to them face to face and say, I'm going to treat you in a way that I wish you would treat me. I wish you would talk to me. I'm going to do that for you. This is the first way that we see that Jesus is going to ask us to fight back weird. And in each of these scenarios, Jesus is going to ask us to fight back weird. So in this first one, Jesus is going to ask us to treat someone who is treating us as if we are less than, to treat them as an equal. The second example that Jesus gives is taking a tunic and giving your cloak. So it says, if anyone would sue you and take your tunic or your shirt, same thing, let them have your cloak as well. So to explain this, this like interesting scenario that Jesus is setting up, which is like somebody is trying to sue you for your tunic and you're offering your cloak as well. Again, culturally, we have to understand what's going on. So what Jesus is saying is that if someone is being sued for their clothing, one, they are very poor. Like, if all they have to offer is their clothes, they are a very poor person. This is probably all that they have. And then the second thing is that it's very odd that he specifically says, sue you for your tunic or your shirt. Because in the law, there were grounds for suing someone and using a cloak, which is like the outer garment. But there's nothing about suing somebody and taking their tunic, which is like the inner garment. Like, think about like a t-shirt, but a long t-shirt. Like, that's the tunic. And so this idea that Jesus says that someone would be trying to sue someone for their tunic is like, this is somebody taking advantage of somebody who is poor and also trying to be sneaky and get around the law by saying, I'm going to take your tunic, which is not allowed by law. So when Jesus says to respond to this kind of injustice, or this kind of somebody taking advantage of another, is not with injustice, but with generosity. When Jesus suggests to give a cloak and a tunic, this would be fighting back super weird. And it's super weird because the person who would be standing there now no longer has their tunic or their cloak. So they're standing there naked, is what's happening, or mostly naked. That's weird. And this act is literally and figuratively exposing the wrong being done. And it's not by fighting back in the same way. It's not trying to sue this other person back or trying to get even, but it's by fighting with weird, almost humorous generosity. So don't do what is normal when you are being treated unfairly. When you feel like I'm being taken advantage of. Again, this is not a direct line, but maybe an example would be sometimes we feel taken advantage of. If you've ever worked on a group project and you feel like somebody in the group is not pulling their weight, or maybe you've worked in a partner project and you're like, I am pretty much doing all of the work here, and I think that this is one of those times where we can feel like I am being treated unfairly. I'm being expected to do all of the work, even though we're going to get the same grade. And so I think what is normal for us to respond to that, some normal things that we might do, would be to just also not do the work. Be like, nah, you're not going to do the work? I'm not going to do the work. I'm just blowing this whole thing up. We're all getting Fs. So we could not do what somebody wants. We can also just ignore the situation or the person. If you're in a group project and you feel like one member is not pulling their weight, often what happens is we all talk about that person. And we don't actually talk to them. We just talk about them and how frustrated we are. And then the other thing is, we'll do all the work because we feel like we have no choice. So we'll just kind of do the work, even though we feel really slighted. But can I suggest some things that would be weird? Some ways that we can maybe offer generosity in this scenario. No. I'll tell you what Sam said later. You can offer to help someone, maybe offer to do the project together. Sit in an actual space and physically be together and do the work together. I would say be overly generous by caring for the person. Try to actually...
It was dying the whole time.
We're good? Different mic? Great. Hold on, we're going to be fine. Okay, I'll tell you now what Sam said. He said... Okay. It's not that bad. Yeah? Yeah! We can go tech team. They're working through a lot tonight. I'm very proud of them. Okay. So back to our scenario of we're group projecting and somebody's not pulling their weight. We're frustrated. What can we do? How can we be generous? I think that we can care for a person. I think sometimes that we can assume that somebody's just attempting to take advantage of us and make us do all of the work when we may not understand the scenario that's going on with them. So being able to talk with them, being able to ask them what's going on, showing care. So in this, Jesus is saying, when you're being treated unfairly, fight back weird with generosity. So we're going to fight with generosity. And then lastly, the last instance that Jesus gives us is if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. And I have a visual aid for this one to make it more clear what it means to go 1 mile, to actually go 2 miles. Yeah, tech team? Yeah, there we go. You get it. There's 1 mile. There's 2 miles. I feel like that's a joke that had to be made when you have somebody named Miles in your group. So, there you go, Miles. Thanks for being my example. Okay, but seriously, what Jesus is talking about here when he talks about when you are forced to go 1 mile, go with them 2. This is talking about that in their day, Roman soldiers could by law force anyone to carry their gear for up to 1 mile. This is something that they could just decide. They could see somebody and say, you are going to carry my gear. And remember, Jesus' audience is a nation under Roman occupation. So this is likely the example that Jesus is giving here. And this is people being mistreated. What do we do when we are mistreated? This is treating people, not like people, but like servants or like pack animals. So Jesus' weird suggestion is to carry a soldier's gear for an extra mile, because this would shift the terms of the interaction. Following Jesus' instruction would creatively resist this oppression and assert dignity while willfully choosing to go a second mile. This says, I'm going to treat this Roman soldier with generosity, with kindness, and with care, as one might treat a friend or a family member. This would be saying, I want to help you, not I have to help you. I'm choosing to do this, and this would be weird. The idea that Jesus is saying to do this is a very odd idea. And for me, even watching this, I was thinking, that's the same face that the guy on my bus made when I told him I couldn't go to hell. He was like, I don't know what to do with you. You're just so weird. And when we respond this way, it shifts the whole situation. It takes away this power dynamic that's attempting to be played upon. This shows people that there is a different way, that we don't have to treat each other as less than or try to gain power over one another. And even seeing like how the soldiers respond by stopping and being like, I'll take my gear back, I don't know what to do with this. We can hope that this will happen. We can hope that people will see the love and this generosity and that their behavior will shift. But I also want to help us to understand that we can't control others. We can't decide how they're going to respond. But we do get to decide that we will respond in the way of Jesus. So Jesus, in these examples, he isn't just saying, let evil go without any recourse. Jesus is saying that we are to respond by being, when we are wronged, by fighting back weird. This needs to be done in an attitude of love, and in the attitude of Christ, meaning that we would creatively extend generosity and kindness, not in a way that we're going to try to stick it to the person who is wronging us, but to truly see them as God sees them, as a person valued by him. All of these examples, Jesus says both parties are made in the image of God. Both deserve to be treated as valued. So when you are treated as less than, fight back weird by treating someone as an equal. When you are treated unfairly, fight back weird by being generous. And when you are treated like you don't matter, fight back weird with care and kindness.